Hello and welcome to building the Air Analyzer 1 module for the STELLA 1.2 modular system. We're going to start with the parts. You're going to need a methane sensor, gas board, CO2 sensor, magnetic couplers, particulate sensor, air temperature sensor, and quick connects, as well as a half-size protoboard. For 3D parts, you are going to need an end cap, a main housing, a particulate sensor spacer, a sensor clamp, coupler alignment, and assembly platform. Alright, now let's get started building. First, you're going to want to cut the traces for 30 AB, BC, CD, 30 IHI, IJ. Make sure to take out those little gaps. Alright, and I like to mark my corner there with a little black mark and a 30 position on the back. Make sure I'm taking out the right traces as I'm going along. Alright, once I dig out those traces, then I test for continuity using my multimeter, making sure that there's no unwanted bridging. If it all looks good, I get my alignment coupler there, and I put my magnetic couplers in there, and it's off screen for the moment, but I'm making sure everything's aligned, and then I'm going to tape it up. Okay, make sure you leave room for the probes. Now, in this video, I did solder before I put the wires in. If I were to do it again, I would put the wires in first and then solder, make sure it's all aligned, and get that set up top. Okay. So, here we go. Let's go ahead and solder these on then. Alright, so having noticed my mistake, I'm going to go ahead here and heat up the solder and push the wire in. Not the best technique, but yeah, a little overconfident. So you're going to put a ground wire in from B30 to the ground negative below A30, 3 volt A30 to the positive below A30. Then you're going to do the SCL C30 to the negative above J30, SDA E30 to the positive above J30. Then you're going to take the 5 volt connector and you're going to put it from J30 and leave it loose. Leave a pretty good length, okay? And then your analog H30, and again, you're going to leave some length, and it's going to go in after you pop in your particulate sensor. So hold on to that. Alright, and as you noticed, I leave the wire sort of sticking out haphazardly for a bit. It does make it a little bit more fun, honestly. I really enjoy this build. Alright, now once you have your wires inserted over there, now you're going to put a ground wire from AA to the ground negative below AA. A 5 volt from H8 to H9, so just one skip. And then you're going to do a 4.7k ohm resistor C9 to the ground negative below A9. Then a 100k ohm resistor from E9 to E12, and another 100k ohm resistor from C12 to the ground negative below A12. And we'll go ahead and get some things prepared here. There we go. Pop the little wire in there, nice little ground wire. I like to set most of this stuff up and then have a bit to solder when I flip over the board. It's very satisfying getting large sorts of chunks out of the way. Now again, you might want to do this slower. You might do it one at a time, but I had a lot of fun. Okay, you're going to wire the headers from G3 to G7. So, see, that's a nice 5-pin header. Let's go ahead and get that over there. Okay. And again, I do, yeah, see, I flip it over. I usually like to do, the first header and the second header, or the last header, to make sure that it is nice and flush. Okay, and so with that, if it is nice and flush, I can go ahead and finish soldering in the rest of the header. Okay, and then let's see what the board looks like there up close. Alright, so this is what your wire should look like over here. And you can see that basically this is the other error analyzing sensor, but we switched to polarities here. Okay, and the 3D printed housing is different, so you cannot use the old 3D printed housing. So if you have an old error analyzer sensor, you don't have to completely dismantle it. You do have to switch to polarity. So you have to, so ground goes to B and power goes to A. So that's the difference. And it's pretty easy to switch. I just take off those wires, and then you can actually do, if you need to, a little either wiring in the back, but make it very, it's got to just make it pretty close to the board. Alright, so now we're going to wire H5 to the ground negative below A3. We're going to do our 3 volt H7 to the 3 volt positive below A2. Our SCL J4 to SAL negative above J4. And your SDA positive above J3 to J3. And now we get to the fun stuff here, okay? We are using our little gas sensor breakout board, and you're only putting in two 2-pin headers to the adapter board, okay? And I like to set it onto the proto board and then solder those headers in. Make sure you use the short side there, the smaller of the header pins. Take it off and take a look at it, okay? And eventually we're going to put the gas sensor in. And the gas sensor fits in a certain way. It's only one way really you can put it in. It's very hard to mess up. So this is a nice close-up of the header board. So pay attention to where ground is B1, your H1, and your A1. Okay, so you're going to need to know that when you put it into your proto board. Alright, so when you put your header pins in there, make sure the adapter ground is in D8. Your adapter B1 is in D9, H1 to G8, A1 to G9. Okay, so you might have to lift up your header pins once or twice just to make sure that your adapter is on correctly in the correct orientation. But once you have it in the correct orientation, then you pop it on there. Okay. And so I like to trim the methane gas probes after I solder them in. Okay. So, and because the methane sensor is flat, I keep it on the flat there and try and hold it in. Okay. Alright, with that we're going to install the CO2 breakout. Okay, and we are going to go from G3 to G7 and the header pins. Okay, and I like to put a little header pin underneath there just to make sure that the CO2 sensor is level, and then we go ahead and solder it on in. So now we hook up our quick connects to our particulate sensor, and then we put our spacer underneath that particulate sensor. And you're going to note that basically it rests on that sensor, and there's two little tabs that goes in those holes from the 3D print, and you're going to solder down your particulate sensor with some wires. Okay, and it's going to go from your ground negative below A13 to A29, and your ground positive J13 to J29. Okay, and that is going to help hold in your particulate sensor. Now I like to make it pretty taut with these particulate sensor strap downs, um, so that the sensor doesn't move too much. Now, if you remember from earlier, besides the strap downs, you have ones that you connect after the particulate sensor. So um, you're going to want to uh, solder in your 5 volt from J30 to J8, and your analog from H30 to D12. Okay, and you do that once your particulate sensor is in, and it also helps strap them down. Finally, you want to install your temperature sensor using the quick connector from the particulate sensor. Okay, and once you have that, your system is complete, and now you can put it into its housing. So you slip it into its housing there, and the front cap has its own little area for the temperature sensor, so it shouldn't get in the way. Just got to watch the wires a little bit, close it up, and you have a complete air temperature sensor. So now it's time to test it with the Stella 1.2 and make sure that everything is working. Okay. And now you have completed your assembly of the Stella 1.2 air analyzer. Thank you for choosing Stella, and go explore.